The morning sun spilled through the narrow streets of the market, illuminating dust motes that danced lazily in the air. She moved among the stalls like a shadow, careful, measured, her fingers brushing over the fabrics and trinkets without drawing attention to herself. Every glance over her shoulder, every subtle adjustment of her sleeve was a silent prayer. Don't notice, don't see. The scar curled along the inside of her wrist, jagged and pale against her skin, a souvenir of mistakes and misfortune she had long since buried. She had learned early on that some marks were dangerous, not because they inflicted pain, but because they whispered truth she was not yet ready to face. A merchant called out, offering baskets of apples, their red skins gleaming under the sun. She bent to inspect them, the shadow of her hair falling over her face, shielding the scar. A small, involuntary shiver ran through her as she felt a heat brush against her awareness, a presence unlike any she had encountered in this market. From the corner of her eye, she sensed it, a shadow that lingered too long, a ripple in the air that made her heartbeat stutter. Not a man, not quite, something older, stronger. She froze for a fraction of a second, fighting the urge to run, to fold herself into anonymity. The crowd pressed around her, voices blending into a dull hum, but she felt it through the press of air, the faint tremor of power brushing her very skin. Someone was watching her. Not casually, not out of curiosity, intently, purposefully, as if her very essence had been whispered across the winds to him. She tugged her sleeve lower, hiding the scar further, but her fingers trembled as if it had a mind of its own. No one can know, she reminded herself, though her pulse betrayed her panic. The scar was hers, a secret she had carried alone, and she would guard it with every ounce of her being. And yet, there was something in the air, a subtle recognition she could not shake. The hairs on her neck rose as a shadow passed across her peripheral vision, sharp and deliberate. Her breath caught, chest tightening, and she realized she was not just being watched, she was being sought. A deep, resonant voice broke the spell, low and smooth, brushing against her consciousness without a word. She glanced toward the sound, only to see a figure moving through the crowd with a presence that demanded attention, radiating power and authority in a way that made the market fade around him. Something in the air shifted, like a storm approaching. Her scar burned under the sleeve she had pulled too tightly, a subtle thrum she could not ignore, and in that moment her carefully constructed walls felt as fragile as glass. She did not know who he was, yet something in her instincts whispered the truth. He knows. He sees, and he has been waiting. A sudden crash of a tipped stall startled the crowd. She ducked instinctively, heart pounding in her chest, and caught a glimpse of his gaze, sharp, piercing, and undeniably aware. It lingered only for a heartbeat, yet it seared her like fire. Recognition, unspoken, dangerous, inevitable. Her fingers curled over the edge of her sleeve, hiding the mark that had defined her, haunted her, and now, perhaps, had betrayed her. The world around her seemed to tilt, the murmurs of the market fading into the background as a single, chilling certainty took hold. She had been found. And in that instant, she realized the truth she had tried so desperately to deny. Her scar was no longer just a secret. It was a calling. The forest beyond the market whispered with anticipation, the leaves rustling like a living thing under the first light of dusk. A presence moved through the trees, deliberate and commanding, each step carrying weight, authority, and a quiet, untamed power. He was the Alpha, and the air seemed to bend around him, alive with the hum of his dominance. He had returned to his territory after weeks away, a storm of purpose and instinct, carrying the scent of distant lands, danger, and the pull of destiny. The pack had already sensed it, the shift in energy, the subtle tremor of anticipation, but he barely noticed them. His eyes were searching, scanning, as if something vital had eluded him for too long. And then he saw her. At first, it was just a fleeting glimpse, a shadow under a market canopy, but the moment his gaze fell on the sleeve she had pulled too tightly over her wrist, his heart clenched. There it was, the scar, not just any scar, but the mark he had been chasing in whispers and visions that no mortal should ever perceive. It was his mark, his bond, and she had hidden it all this time. Something low, almost like a growl of recognition, stirred deep in his chest. His instinct screamed at him, fierce and unrelenting. She was near. She had been near all along, The threads of fate, delicate and invisible, had led him to this moment. And yet she remained oblivious to the truth, her eyes darting nervously through the crowd, unaware of the destiny that had just found her. He moved with the ease of a predator, blending with the shifting crowd, a presence felt more than seen. Every instinct in his body tightened, alerting him to her subtle movements, the nervous way she adjusted her sleeve, the slight tremor in her fingers. The scar pulsed beneath the fabric, almost as if it recognized him too, responding to his nearness. For a heartbeat, he hesitated. She didn't know him. She didn't understand what this meant, and yet every cell in his body knew that ignoring her now was impossible. He stepped closer, careful to remain unnoticed for now, letting the wind carry his scent subtly toward her, a test. Her breath hitched when the invisible pull brushed against her consciousness. Something in the air shifted, a weight pressing against her chest. The hairs on her arms rose. She turned, heart racing, scanning the crowd instinctively for a threat she could not name. And there he was standing just beyond the stalls, calm, commanding, and impossibly near. Recognition flared, though she could not place it. Her instinct screamed in warning and desire, confusing her, forcing her to retreat a step. And yet, her eyes lingered on him, drawn despite herself, as if invisible threads were pulling them together. He allowed himself one measured breath, observing her from the shadows, her secret, her fear, her mark. They were all laid bare to him without a word spoken. And a certainty settled over him, fierce and undeniable. She belonged to him. The market faded around them, the noise dimming as if the world itself held its breath. And when she turned to slip deeper into the crowd, unaware of how close she had come to fate, he let a shadow of a smile curve his lips. She was his, and he would find a way to make her understand. Her chest still burned from the weight of his gaze, though he had not spoken a word. The market noise pressed in, but her senses were narrowed, focused on the figure that had slipped into her awareness like a shadow she could not shake. Every instinct screamed that he was dangerous, yet the pull toward him was equally undeniable, like a moon tugging at a restless tide. She tightened her grip on the basket in her hands, forcing herself to move, to blend with the crowd. Yet no matter how she tried to disappear among the stalls and merchants, his presence lingered, intangible but inescapable. The scar she hid burned under her sleeve, reacting to him in ways that made her stomach twist with a mixture of fear and something else, something she refused to name. He moved closer, not aggressively, not yet, but with a silent certainty that he would not be denied. His gaze met hers for a heartbeat, dangerous, consuming, aware of every secret she tried to bury. It was a look that demanded answers, though none were given. A shiver traced her spine, involuntary, and she realized with a pang that she had been holding her breath. "Careful where you go," a voice murmured, low, threaded with authority. She flinched, nearly dropping her basket. It was him, close enough now that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, the scent of pine and earth, the subtle pulse of something primal that made her knees weaken. I'm fine," she stammered, words catching in her throat. She wanted to back away, to vanish into the crowd, yet her feet remained rooted, betraying her. Her mind screamed at her to hide the scar, to hide herself, but her heart betrayed her, beating in wild, frantic rhythm that he could surely hear. "You hide a lot," he said, voice a low rumble that sent a shiver through her. He tilted his head, studying her wrist with an intensity that made her stomach clench. "Things that aren't meant to be hidden." Her fingers tightened over the basket. I'm not hiding anything," she said, though her own voice sounded like a lie. She avoided his gaze, convinced that if she looked at him, the truth would shine through and destroy her carefully constructed defenses. He stepped closer, just a fraction, enough to make the air between them feel charged, electric. This mark," he said, a whisper almost meant for himself, "it tells me more than you know." Her breath caught. His words, a half revelation, half threat, sent panic and longing spiraling in equal measure. She wanted to deny him, to run, to pretend this connection didn't exist, but something deep inside, something feral, instinctive, knew that she could not escape him, not now, not ever. The crowd shifted around them, oblivious to the tension crackling like lightning between the two of them. And then, before she could reply, his eyes flared with recognition, a flash of something intense, raw, and terrifying, and he turned away, slipping back into the crowd. Her knees nearly gave out. She watched him go, heart hammering, breath ragged, and knew with absolute certainty. This encounter had changed everything. He had seen her, known something, and neither of them would ever be able to pretend it hadn't happened. A dangerous, silent promise hung in the air as she clutched her basket tighter, the scar burning through the fabric. He will find out, he will come for me, and when he does, I will not be able to hide. Night had begun to drape itself over the village, the sky deepening to bruised purples and blues, shadows stretching long across cobblestone streets. She moved quickly, keeping her head low, aware that the memory of the Alpha's gaze still lingered in her mind like a phantom. Her heart raced not from fear alone, but from the way his presence seemed to haunt her, echoing in her chest, impossible to ignore. She ducked into a narrow alley to avoid the last lingering customers of the market, pulling her sleeve further down to shield the scar that still throbbed beneath her skin. It had never felt so alive, so insistent, as if it knew someone was watching, someone who could unravel the secrets she had buried for years. A whisper of movement behind her made her spin, instincts sharp and ready, but it was only the wind, or so she told herself. Yet the hairs on the back of her neck rose, and the prickle of unease that had been her constant companion all these years flared suddenly into a blaze. "Why do you hide so carefully?" The voice was soft, nearly imperceptible, yet it carried authority that made her knees wobble. Her pulse skipped. She hadn't seen him, not really, but somehow he was near. He knows, a part of her thought, trembling with both dread and an odd, unbidden hope. "I'm just careful," she said, voice tight, trying to sound casual, even though every muscle in her body screamed that she was anything but nothing important. He stepped closer from the shadows, silent as a predator, yet the air between them seemed charged, electric, and somehow unbearably intimate. "Nothing important doesn't throb like that," he murmured, eyes flicking to the faint ridge beneath her sleeve. You've been hiding it for a reason." She froze, breath caught. Her hands tightened into fists, fighting the urge to shove her sleeve even lower. Every instinct told her to flee, yet part of her, an unreasoning, primal part, wanted to lean into his scrutiny, wanted to see what he truly knew. "It's mine," she whispered, barely audible. She dared not reveal more, not yet. She had learned the hard way that some truths were dangerous, and the world was cruel to those who bore visible reminders of things that should remain hidden. His gaze softened slightly, yet there was still an edge to it, the unyielding force of someone who demanded honesty. "It's mine, too," he said quietly, almost to himself. The words were fleeting, enigmatic, and she couldn't tell whether he was speaking of possession, destiny, or some unspoken bond she didn't yet understand. Her pulse thundered, a mixture of panic and fascination. Something in his presence made the scar on her wrist burn hotter, as if acknowledging a connection long ignored. Her secret, the mark she had thought she owned alone, was no longer hers to guard, and the realization both terrified and thrilled her. The alley seemed to shrink around them, the night thickening, the shadows almost sentient, closing in with a silent, heavy expectation. And then, before she could gather her thoughts, he was gone, slipping away as suddenly as he had appeared, leaving only the lingering warmth of his presence and the undeniable knowledge that he had seen too much. Her breath came in sharp, trembling bursts. She pressed a hand to her wrist, feeling the scar pulse under her skin. He knows everything, and for the first time, she wondered if hiding it had ever really been an option. A distant howl carried across the rooftops, sharp and urgent, and she shivered. The night was far from over. The moon hung low and full over the clearing outside the pack house, bathing the world in silver light. Shadows stretched long across the ground, and the night was alive with whispers. The rustle of leaves, the distant cry of a wolf, the faint, impatient murmur of the pack waiting within. She stepped onto the open field, heart hammering, every nerve alert. Tonight she had no choice but to be seen. He was there, standing at the edge of the clearing, a figure of authority and raw power, his gaze sweeping over the assembled pack. The moment it fell on her, her pulse stuttered. She tried to stand tall to meet his eyes, but the scar on her wrist burned beneath her sleeve, a reminder of everything she had tried to keep hidden. "You shouldn't be here," he said, voice cutting through the night like steel. Calm, controlled, but with an undercurrent of something darker, something that made her knees tremble. I had to," she whispered, voice barely audible. The words felt small against the weight of his presence, the knowledge that he could unravel her with a single glance. The pack shifted behind him, murmurs rising like a tide. They saw the tension, the unspoken bond, the subtle marks of recognition, and curiosity rippled through the group. She felt their scrutiny like fire on her skin. He stepped closer, and the air seemed to constrict around her. "You hide too much," he said, tone sharp, cutting through any pretense. "I don't tolerate lies in my territory." Her chest tightened. She had expected anger, yes, but not this. This cold dismissal that felt heavier than any accusation. "I'm not lying," she said, but her voice wavered. He shook his head slowly, and the weight of that single movement felt like a verdict. "You are nothing but a mystery to me," he said, eyes narrowing, "and mysteries in my pack endanger everyone." The words hit her harder than any physical blow. Her cheeks burned, humiliation clawing through her like ice. The scar she had hidden, the mark she had feared would define her, now felt like a brand, a spotlight drawing unwanted attention. She had imagined fear, secrecy, and caution, but never, rejection, never from him. The pack's whispers grew louder, a chorus of speculation, and she realized how exposed she was not just to him, but to everyone. Every step, every glance, every heartbeat seemed to betray her secret. "I'll leave," she said finally, voice tight, tears threatening. She turned, hands trembling, wanting nothing more than to disappear into the forest, to escape the weight of his disapproval, to hide from the pain that gnawed at her. But before she could take a step, he called her name. The sound was sharp, commanding, yet distant, as if it belonged to a world she could not enter. She froze. "You think hiding makes you safe?" he asked, eyes blazing. "It doesn't. It only makes you weaker." She swallowed the lump in her throat, the sting of his words pressing down like a physical weight. Her pride and fear warred within her, and for the first time she wondered if this rejection, this misunderstanding, was a test she was destined to fail. As she stepped back into the shadows, blending with the trees, the moonlight traced the curve of her wrist beneath the sleeve, the scar pulsing faintly, alive and unyielding. And though her body moved away, a part of her heart stayed frozen in the clearing, where he had stood like a storm she could not escape. Tonight, she had learned a hard truth. Desire and destiny could not shield her from humiliation, and even the strongest bonds could shatter under misunderstanding. But somewhere, deep beneath the sting of rejection, a seed of something forbidden had already taken root. The forest was alive with shadows, silvered by the moonlight that slipped through the canopy in fractured beams. She moved quietly among the trees, heart still pounding from the night's humiliation, every step deliberate, every breath measured. Yet despite her fear, she could not erase the memory of his gaze, sharp and consuming, like a blade pressing against her chest. He had left her in the clearing, words lingering in the air, but even in his absence she felt him. The subtle pull, the weight of his presence, was in the rustle of leaves, the sigh of wind, in the rhythm of her own heartbeat. It was maddening, impossible to ignore. She barely noticed the soft sound of footsteps behind her until a hand brushed against her shoulder, firm, grounding. She spun, ready to flee, but it was him. His eyes, calm yet intense, studied her with an unreadable expression. "You shouldn't wander alone," he said, voice low, a mixture of warning and something protective. "I can take care of myself," she replied, trying to steady her shaking hands. Her voice was stronger than she felt, but she knew he could see through the facade. He stepped closer, the space between them charged, unspoken tension crackling in the cool night air. "You're hiding more than you realize," he murmured. His hand hovered near hers for a heartbeat, then dropped, deliberate restraint evident in every movement. And yet, I can't stop thinking about you. Her breath caught. Desire and fear collided in her chest, sharp and disorienting. The scar beneath her sleeve pulsed faintly, almost as if acknowledging the truth she could not speak aloud. He knows. He senses it. He knows what binds us. You shouldn't care, she whispered, voice trembling. It's forbidden. You're the alpha, and I, and you. His gaze softened, a slow burn of understanding and longing beneath the predator's edge. You're mine whether you believe it or not, whether the pack accepts it or not. Hiding only delays what's inevitable. Her stomach fluttered, a mixture of fear and a thrill she could not name. This bond, the magnetic, undeniable pull that drew them together, was dangerous. Forbidden, and yet in his nearness she felt a strange safety, a promise that even in danger he would protect her. Why me? She asked, barely audible, voice cracking. Why now? Because I found you, he said simply. And some connections, they don't wait for permission, they don't care about rules or fears, they demand surrender. The words lingered, heavy and intoxicating. She wanted to deny them, to retreat, but the pull in her chest was relentless. The scar beneath her sleeve, a living reminder of the bond she could not escape. He stepped back slightly, giving her a fraction of space, yet his presence remained overwhelming, surrounding her like a heat she could not avoid. We will be tested, he continued, voice softening, almost intimate. And the world will not make it easy, but I will protect you, always. Her hands trembled, a mixture of anticipation and fear. She wanted to reach for him to close the space between them, yet she knew the danger of giving in too soon. Their bond was growing, undeniable, and every heartbeat brought them closer to a truth she was not ready to face. And yet, in that moonlit forest, with the night pressing close and the scar beneath her sleeve pulsing like a heartbeat of its own, she allowed herself a single, quiet acknowledgement. Some connections could not be denied. Some bonds, however forbidden, demanded surrender, and theirs was one of them. The night had turned colder, the forest thick with mist that curled around the roots and clung to the trunks of ancient trees. She moved cautiously along the hidden path leading to the edge of the territory, senses straining with every rustle, every distant snap of a branch. The bond she shared with him thrummed faintly beneath her skin, a steady pulse that was both comforting and maddening. But danger lingered in the shadows, and instinct told her it was closer than she wanted to admit. A subtle shift in the air made her stop. Her hand instinctively went to the sleeve covering the scar, her pulse quickening. A presence foreign yet deliberate brushed against her senses. A rival pack, or worse, someone who knew more about her than they should. Her heart raced as she spun, trying to locate the source, but the mist was a perfect shield. You're not alone, a voice murmured from the darkness, low and edged with malice. She froze. The words were simple, but the threat behind them was clear. Panic clawed at her chest, sharp and cold. She knew she couldn't face this alone, not now. She reached instinctively for the alpha, but he was nowhere in sight. Suddenly, the mist shifted, and two figures emerged, their eyes glinting with ill intent. A rival pack, hunters of power, opportunists who thrived on chaos and fear. Their leader stepped forward, a sneer curling his lips. So this is the one, he said, voice dripping contempt. The little secret the alpha has been hiding. Her stomach lurched. She realized with horror that her secret was no longer safe. Every whispered fear, every carefully guarded lie was teetering on the edge of exposure. Stay back, she demanded, though her voice wavered. The pull in her chest, the bond, the warning, throbbed urgently, screaming for him to appear. And then, as if answering her silent plea, the air shifted. He was there. The alpha emerged from the shadows, a storm of authority and fury, his presence radiating control. Every hair on his body seemed to bristle with power, the forest itself trembling under the weight of his arrival. Leave her, he commanded, voice deep and unwavering, or face the consequences. The rival pack faltered, but their leader sneered, undeterred. You protect her too much. Perhaps she's not worth your blood yet. A growl rumbled deep in the alpha's chest, low and primal, vibrating through the mist. He stepped closer, eyes blazing, each movement controlled yet lethal. "She is mine," he said, words simple, final, undeniable. "And anyone who dares threaten her will answer to me." The tension crackled, palpable, and for a heartbeat, the rival pack seemed frozen, unsure whether to flee or strike. The forest held its breath, the mist swirling around them, masking the danger but amplifying the stakes. She stood behind him, heart racing, feeling both protected and terrified. The scar beneath her sleeve throbbed with energy, as if recognizing the escalation, the danger that had finally crossed the boundary she could not contain. The rival leader's sneer faltered, uncertainty flickering in his eyes, and before she could exhale, he barked a warning and melted back into the mist, his companions following. Shadows retreated, but the threat remained, lingering unresolved, a reminder that her world was far from safe. The Alpha turned toward her, intensity softening only slightly, eyes scanning her for any sign of injury. "You must trust me," he murmured, voice low, intimate, and commanding all at once. "I will protect you, always." She swallowed, trembling, aware that trust was both necessary and terrifying. In this moment, she realized something she could not deny. He had chosen her, and even in danger, the bond between them had only grown stronger. But the shadows of betrayal would not disappear so easily. The moon hung heavy over the pack territory, casting silver light that glittered on the damp grass. She moved through the forest, her steps hesitant, her senses taut with the lingering threat of the rival pack. The scar beneath her sleeve throbbed with a strange, insistent energy, pulsing in rhythm with her heartbeat. She had always feared it, hidden it from the world, but tonight it felt alive. Every step she took made the pulse stronger, sharper, a subtle heat creeping along her skin. Her fingers itched to brush the sleeve aside to see it, but fear held her back. She had never known this kind of power, never felt it awaken beneath her flesh, and now it was demanding attention. A sudden rustle in the shadows made her spin. Her pulse spiked, the scar burning hotter, almost scorching beneath the fabric. But it wasn't the rival pack this time. The Alpha emerged silently from the mist, his presence like a force of nature, commanding, protective, and terrifying all at once. His gaze fell immediately on her wrist, and his breath hitched slightly, sharp and unsteady, a subtle crack in his otherwise controlled demeanor. "You feel it, don't you?" he asked softly, voice low, almost reverent. "It's responding to me." Her throat went dry. I don't know what it is," she whispered, her voice trembling. The scar pulsed stronger at his nearness, heat crawling along her veins as if seeking him, calling to him. "It's always been. Just me, no," he said firmly, stepping closer, eyes blazing. "It's never just been yours, it's mine too, it's our bond." The words hung in the night like a revelation, and her chest tightened. She had felt the pull, the invisible thread that tethered them together, but never so strongly, never with such undeniable force. The scar burned in tandem with her emotions, fear, desire, defiance, all twisting into a raw, powerful current that she could no longer ignore. He lifted a hand, almost hesitating, then let his fingers hover near the fabric covering the mark. The energy surged suddenly, bright and scorching, and the sleeve was ripped aside, revealing the jagged scar in full. The Alpha's eyes widened, pupils dilating, and a low growl rumbled in his chest. "It's my mark," he whispered, voice trembling with awe and something darker, possession, longing, recognition. "I've felt it, even when it was hidden. You carry me with you." Her knees nearly buckled. The secret she had guarded for so long, the fear that had shaped every choice she had made, was now exposed. And yet it was no longer shame that filled her. It was the raw, electrifying truth. She belonged to him just as he belonged to her. Before she could speak, a flash of movement in the distance reminded her of the rival pack still lurking, still waiting. The bond surged again, hotter, faster, a warning as well as a call. And in that instant, she realized she could no longer hide. Not from him, not from the pack, and certainly not from destiny itself. The Alpha's hand brushed against hers, tentative yet claiming, and she felt the power of the mark surge through them both. "You are mine," he said, voice low, fierce, unyielding, and no one will take you from me. But the night held its breath, and in the distance shadows shifted. The danger was far from over. And for the first time she understood fully. Her secret was not only revealed, it had awakened, and with it a force neither of them could ignore. Dawn had yet to break, and the pack house stood silent, cloaked in mist that swirled like restless spirits around its sturdy walls. Inside, tension crackled in the air, heavy and sharp, as the pack gathered in the great hall. Eyes flicked toward her, whispered murmurs brushing the edges of her consciousness. She felt their scrutiny like a tangible weight pressing against her chest. The Alpha stood at the center, commanding, unyielding, and unflinching. The mark on her wrist pulsed faintly beneath the fabric, a subtle reminder of the bond that now tied them together, and of the storm that awaited them all. "Why is she here?" demanded one of the older wolves, his voice a low growl, edged with suspicion. "You bring outsiders into the pack, Alpha." "She is not an outsider," he replied, voice calm but edged with steel. Every eye in the room turned toward him. "She carries my mark. She is my mate. Her place is here with me." A ripple of outrage spread through the room. Murmurs escalated into sharp, accusatory voices. "Mate, how can you claim her? She's untested." Another growled, teeth bared. "She is not of our blood." She felt a wave of fear and anger wash over her. Their rejection, the humiliation from before it, all returned tenfold, sharpened by the collective judgment. She clenched her fists, the scar on her wrist throbbing with every pulse of emotion. She had never wanted power, but now it demanded recognition. "I do not care what you think," the Alpha continued, voice rising, cutting through the tension like a blade. "She is mine, and anyone who threatens her will answer to me." There was a silence, heavy and charged, as the pack processed his words. Some scowled, others whispered quietly, but none dared to challenge him directly. His authority was absolute, but so too was the tension, the precarious balance between loyalty and instinct. Then one of the younger wolves, emboldened by anger, stepped forward. "You cannot just—" A sharp motion, a subtle flare of his power, and the Alpha's presence alone made the wolf falter, eyes wide with recognition of his dominance. "Enough," he said, voice low but final. "If you threaten her, you threaten the pack. Loyalty to the mate is loyalty to me. Understand this or leave." She felt her chest tighten, the weight of their scrutiny pressing down, yet beneath it all, a current of relief rippled through her. He had chosen her publicly, staking his claim, and though the path ahead would be treacherous, she was no longer alone. A low growl from the far corner drew her attention. A rival pack member, hidden until now, had slipped into their territory under the cover of dawn. He advanced cautiously, eyes flicking to the Alpha and then to her, a dangerous smirk curling his lips. The Alpha stepped forward, energy coiling around him like a living thing. "You dare?" he asked, voice low, lethal. The room seemed to shrink around him, every wolf instinctively aware of the danger. The intruder's smirk faltered. A challenge had been issued, and the Alpha's claim was absolute. The air hummed with the promise of conflict, the tension of unspoken power, and the undeniable truth that the bond between them could no longer be denied, or tested without consequence. She glanced down at her wrist, the scar glowing faintly under the dim light, and realized that her secret, her fear, and her destiny had collided. She was no longer hiding. She was awakened, and the pack would have to accept it. The clearing outside the pack house was alive with tension, the morning sun struggling to pierce the lingering mist. Every eye in the pack watched as the Alpha stood, unwavering, his presence radiating power, authority, and something softer. Something no one dared name. She stood beside him, the scar on her wrist now fully revealed, glowing faintly, a mark of claim, of bond, of destiny fulfilled. The murmurs of dissent from earlier had faded, replaced by a charged silence, the air thick with anticipation. Her chest still ached from fear, from the humiliation of misunderstanding, and from the lingering pull of desire she could no longer deny. She glanced at him, seeking reassurance, and found only the certainty in his eyes that he had made his choice. "I have made my decision," he said, voice low, carrying effortlessly across the clearing. Every wolf felt it, every breath caught in their throats. She is my mate. No pack member, no rival, no obstacle will stand between us. My claim is final. A ripple of shock moved through the assembly. Some faces hardened in stubborn resistance, but the alpha's dominance left no room for defiance. He had chosen her, and his word was law. Her knees threatened to buckle, and he caught her hand instinctively, a firm, grounding grip that made her pulse soar. You choose me, she whispered, breath trembling, as if voicing it aloud might shatter the fragile certainty. I have always chosen you, he replied, voice rich with warmth and authority. From the moment I sensed you, I knew the bond, the mark, the connection. It was always yours, always mine, and I will not, cannot, deny it any longer. The words struck her with the force of a tidal wave. Relief, fear, and desire collided within her, leaving her dizzy. She felt the scar pulse warmly under his touch, the energy of their bond surging between them, undeniable and fierce. The pack watched as he stepped closer, eyes locked on hers, the distance between them charged with unspoken promises. Do you accept this? Me, he asked, voice soft now, intimate yet still commanding, the alpha and protector intertwined in every syllable. She nodded, unable to speak, heart pounding so violently it felt as if it would break free. Her free hand rose instinctively, brushing against his chest, feeling the steady power of him beneath her fingertips. Yes, she whispered finally, I accept you. A low growl of satisfaction rumbled from him, a primal sound that seemed to vibrate through the clearing, through the mist, through every wolf present. Then it is done, he said, voice resolute, and he drew her close, lips brushing hers in a claim that was gentle, fierce, and unyielding all at once. The kiss was more than desire, it was promise, protection, destiny. The scar burned with the energy of their bond, marking the completion of what had been fated, inevitable, and long denied. Around them the pack shifted, some bowing heads in acceptance, others still wary, but none daring to challenge the alpha now. The moment had been claimed, the bond solidified, and the air itself seemed to acknowledge the union. She pressed closer, allowing herself to lean into him fully, the danger of the world momentarily forgotten. The mark on her wrist pulsed warmly, a living testament to the bond they shared. The alpha had chosen, and in doing so, he had claimed not just her, but their shared destiny, unbreakable, undeniable, and eternal. And for the first time, she allowed herself to believe. Love, fate, and desire had finally aligned. The sun had risen fully over the pack territory, scattering the last remnants of mist and bathing the forest in golden light. The world felt lighter, almost fragile in its beauty, as if it were holding its breath after the storm of the previous nights. She walked beside him, the alpha, hand in hand, the scar on her wrist now a gentle warmth against his touch, a symbol not of fear, but of connection and trust. The pack had gathered quietly around them, no longer murmuring, no longer questioning. Even those who had resisted his claim now watched with a tentative respect, seeing the bond between them as unbreakable, as inevitable as the sun climbing over the horizon. She felt their acceptance seep into her, a balm to the years of fear and rejection she had carried alone. I never thought. She began softly, words catching in her throat, that I could feel safe, not just from enemies, but from life itself. He squeezed her hand, eyes tender yet still charged with the authority that marked him as alpha. You are stronger than you know, he said, voice low and intimate, and you never needed to carry your burdens alone, not anymore. The words, simple and yet profound, made her heart ache in a way that was both painful and liberating. The scar beneath her sleeve, her lifelong secret, was no longer a source of shame. It had become a testament to survival, to resilience, and to a bond that could not be broken. She glanced around at the pack, at the home that had once seemed hostile and uncertain, and realized something extraordinary. Trust could be forged even in the face of fear. Her place among them was no longer tentative. It was earned, claimed, and respected. He leaned down, brushing a soft kiss against her forehead, a gesture of protection and devotion. You've healed more than your wounds. He whispered, you've healed the pack too. They see what I've always known, that you belong here with me, with us. A warmth spread through her chest, deeper than desire, deeper than relief. It was love, trust, and belonging all intertwined. She allowed herself to smile, a genuine, unguarded smile for the first time in years. "And you've healed me," she said, voice quiet, almost reverent, from everything I thought I couldn't survive. He pressed her hand to his chest, the rise and fall of his heartbeat steadying hers, anchoring her in this moment, in this reality where they were finally free from fear, from secrecy, from rejection. The scar pulsed faintly, a gentle reminder of the trials they had faced, but now it was a symbol of triumph, a mark of their love and their destiny, no longer hidden, no longer a source of shame. It connected them in ways words could not capture. As the pack slowly returned to their routines, accepting and protective, she felt the last of her doubts dissolve. The world felt lighter, safer, full of possibility, and in his arms, she realized that even the deepest wounds could heal, and that hearts, once broken, could find wholeness in the right place with the right person. The alpha held her close, and she rested her head against his shoulder, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her own. In the soft morning light, the forest alive with birdsong and whispering leaves, she finally allowed herself to hope, truly hope, for the first time in her life. Together, they would face whatever the future held, their bond unbreakable, their hearts finally at peace.